Which one do you like better, the historical fiction or this one?
This one because
Why?
it gives more facts.
I believe if we want our children and our students to be lifelong learners, they need to be well rehearsed in how to read nonfiction, and they need to have more nonfiction resources available to the children as well as the teachers.
We know fiction means not real. So what does history mean? What does history mean, Carly? It's something that happened in the past. So does that mean that it's true? If it happened in the past, does it mean it's true? Let's not answer, let's think. Yes. Did it really happen? Yes. So did history really happen? Yes. Yes. So this part is true information. This is not real. The difference between teaching fiction and nonfiction, your fiction, you're focused on different features, more summary with characters, setting, problem solution, and it's an easier read. The kids are used to that. They've been reading fiction for a long time. Nonfiction, the features are different. We're talking about facts. We're talking about diagrams. You know, we're not talking about pictures anymore. We're having to be able to read the diagram. We have captions that we're trying to read. There's subtitles. So we have to pull out those features. What would be the purpose of a map? We have a different approach to teaching both things. When we teach the kids, when would you want to use a fictional book and when would you want to use a non-fictional book? But it's really nice to have a pairing, to have a fictional book and then pair it with a non-fictional book so the kids can see differences and similarities and get the facts along with having an enjoyable read.
I'm reading you this story, picture book of Harriet Tubman, so we can compare a nonfiction story to the historical fiction that we read yesterday. While we're reading, I want you to keep in mind, what parts yesterday made that story fiction? Sleighs often sang in the fields. The afternoon before Harriet ran off, she sang too. And then the words of her song was a message to the other sleighs.
In the reading book, it said that she was singing it to her sister while her sister was running into the house. In this place, she was telling it to all the other sleighs in the field.
Teaching with informational text versus fiction, I think it's very different. I try to tell the kids with the fiction, you read pretty much for enjoyment, or you chose that book because it's entertaining, whereas informational text is a lot of times maybe to persuade you to do something or to inform you, give you more, again, information about a topic. And with that, I try to tell them that even though you do it for fiction, think about what you're reading, but really comprehend the steps. You know, what are you reading about? If you're reading about tornadoes, make sure you read your captions. Read it maybe slower and give it more thought with informational text than a fiction. Really, again, think about what you're reading. How does this go along with my life, or text to text or text to self? Why is this information important to me? When a student has difficulty with the fiction and the nonfiction, I just kind of sit down and we talk about the different elements of the story of a fiction versus nonfiction. I kind of go over the fiction story with them and then work with them with the nonfiction, and they can compare and contrast. That really helps them a lot when you can compare and contrast. Okay, this is real, even though this is nonfiction and this is realistic fiction, and we really talk about the basic difference between realistic fiction and nonfiction. And that kind of helps them, but they still do get confused with realistic fiction as well as nonfiction and informational text. And that's just constant practice and constantly comparing and contrasting, talking about, this could happen, but this is not a real person.
That's a nonfiction. Some nonfiction stories look like their pictures look like they're fake from the pictures.
Right. Now this nonfiction had what kind of pictures? Real pictures. This one, are the pictures real?
Drawn.
They're drawn, but does it mean it's not nonfiction?
No.
It can still be nonfiction. What kind of book do you think it is?
Nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Why do you think it's nonfiction? Somebody else tell me why it's nonfiction.
Because it looks like real clouds.
Okay, it looks like real clouds. It's got some real pictures. What else would I find in a nonfiction book? When I turn the page, what should I find?
Index and in the back's a glossary.
Okay, in the back should be an index and a glossary.
Table of contents.
And
A table of contents.
there's my glossary. And then what's in the front?
Table of contents.
The table of contents. And look at what's in my table of contents. How clouds form. Where are clouds? Well, then look at this. It says cumulus clouds, stratus clouds, cirrus clouds, nimbus clouds.
What are nimbus clouds?
Well, that's a good question. Informational text is there, it's real. You can really, really dig into a lot of vocabulary words, which I like. You know, a lot of new words that they can learn. It just depends on what you actually want to try to work on or pull out of the book. What is my heading right there? Can you read that? I'm going to give you a hint. Cumulus clouds. Look at the picture.
That looks like a
What do they
little
look like?
penguin.
We did a wax museum on famous people, and my decade was the 70s. I had a student who was doing Michael Jackson, and I was trying to explain to him, you're doing Michael Jackson from the 1970s, not the 80s and the 90s. Well, he did. He brought Michael Jackson biography. But I was showing him that this is his whole life from the time he was born to the time he passed. So I said, look, you want in the 70s, you don't want to read page 1 to 595. Here's the chapters. Just read those chapters, and that's going to be all that you need. You know, those 40 pages out of your 500. And that helped him a lot. And he's like, oh, really? I don't have to read it cover to cover? So that does help a lot, that telling the students with the nonfiction, with the table of contents. I know we've got the web, but still they need to learn how to pick up a book and read a book instead of looking it up on the web.